Alright everybody, it's me again. Hi. Let's go ahead and get started. Away so that doesn't cause any problems. We'll get the glasses on. Extra glasses. I know, I already had one set on. Gotta have two. If you made that is. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is just make up one of these little babies here. Also add into that piece one of these little tiny pieces. We're going to hide that inside so that way people can then go looking for a hidden inner piece. Kind of fun, right? So we'll get this started. Be quite a bit of flame happening here. It's nice and warm. Right now in the outside of Chicago, on Lake Michigan here, it is really, really cold. And I've been looking forward to running this torch for the entire morning. Alright, so what I'm doing here is I'm just going to make a small one of those. I need to heat up at the end of this glass. Kind of gather it all up and watch as the flame turns this into this white hot molten glass. It's all ready to smoosh and burn. A little bit of extra heat in here. Now what I'm doing here is I'm just kind of consistently rolling and rotating the glass rod and watching the color, because that's a real key indicator when you use what's going on. The color from how much you're making. Now that I can see this thing all the way over here is very, very white and hot, and it's really moving around a lot. So I'm just going to pull the other ends down towards the table, which means that as the molten hot glass begins to fall down, it's continually rolling down towards the underside of the unmelted glass rod, and it's then kind of building up this mass. Flow down on that solid glass unmelted. See if that nice little side built up already. That force things along a little bit. We're almost to the point now with the heat, the amount of volume of mass that we have to heat up. Here we go. Sides, and that there's no sort of dark dark shadow in the center of that mass of glass. Want to get rid of all the shadows, it's glowing nice and orange on the inside, and nice and white hot on the outside, and that looks pretty darn great to me. So I'm going to put it in here, give it a little bit of a smash, make sure it stays more or less there. And then the last thing I'm going to do is just potentially put a bend in it. See that? So what that's going to do is I'm going to, once it cools, I will then be able to go in Pull that down just a little bit. And then go in with some dichro. Oh, that looks perfect! This is going to be red dichro. I know it's hard to tell that because right now it just looks clear, but if I can catch just the right angle, you can see the reflection is actually a reddish orange. So, the dichro coating is only on one side, and I'll do a quick test. I'm bringing it down below the flame, looking for the reflection to make sure that it's on this top surface and not on the bottom. Because I want the top to stay, this top here, to stay out of the direct flame, but the bottom part that does not have the coating, that's going to get some of that residual heat that's radiating out from around the bottom of this disc. And what that's doing is it's just raising the temperature of the dichroic sheet, so that way it starts to get more tacky, or at least closer in temperature so the really hot glass will stick to it. If it's too cold, the dichroic glass won't stick to the hot molten glass, and after the molten glass cools down a little bit, there'll be enough difference in size from the expansion and contraction as the molten glass got hot, that as the molten glass cools, it'll shrink and pop away from that red. Now I'm also watching to make sure that the red doesn't get too hot, because I can see that there's a little bit of the dichro that wants to peel up and curve off of the off that flat sheet. So I'm intentionally kind of bringing it a little higher, still keeping it warm. And then I'll go in, intentionally smash this down, get a good coating. While everything is still nice and hot, just kind of shaving it. There we go. Pull that off. And now that that coating has been sandwiched inside, I don't have to be real concerned about how delicate I am, or making sure that it does not get into the flame. At this point, I can introduce it right back into the fire. Not a problem at all. Okay, I'll give you an idea of what it looks like. Let's see here. There we go. Oh yeah, you can see that nice red dichro coating with that blue, or dark green below it. So now what I'm going to do is take this large stick of glass here, pretty big handle that I've got, and I'm not going to add the handle to it. Instead, I'm just going to add a little more mass, and just kind of melt this in, and really sandwich that dichroic glass. I want to add a little additional mass all the way around, making sure that that gets completely encased, and so that way later, when we go about spinning and twisting that dichroic sheet, there'll be plenty of clear glass on both sides, and it won't create this kind of uneven lack of symmetry that we could arise, or have arise if we are not careful. Get this all melted in. It's moving pretty quickly. Now, one of the things I'm intentionally trying to do here is keep the dichroic surface that I'm applying the new glass to, keeping that just kind of behind the flame or just below it, so that way it's getting a little of that radiant heat that's kind of coming off the flame. But the place that I'm really focusing the flame is on that rod that's being applied. And you'll see that I'm rotating ever so slightly back and forth, and that allows the backside of the glass that was cool to become molten hot and liquid. And the front where the glass is coming together in that little nook there, that's nice and hot and molten, and it's willing to accept the flowing glass. Now, if I were kind of working away, which a lot of my students will want to do, the whole backside is still cold, and so you're not getting any of the work that you want done to occur. Now I'm just kind of melting this in, watching as it kind of gets even all the way across. Where I touched with the tweezers earlier on this bottom side, there's a variety of little nooks and crannies that have occurred, and I want to get rid of those ridges and melt those in a little bit, and just kind of see that I'm not trapping any large air bubbles. That's my primary concern at this point, is just melting things in to get rid of any potential for large air bubbles. Now I could wind up with some little air bubbles around the dichroic glass where there's a seam, the two pieces of glass came together, but I'm okay with that. tidy up this end a little bit. Get these two molten hot. See the white glasses, or white hot glasses just flowing together so easily. Now that that's done, we'll take it out for a second, let everything cool, and see how it's just coming together here. Still have a little bit of that weird angle from when I put it in earlier, but we'll take care of that here in just a second. What I'm really trying to do is make sure that this new handle on the right-hand side, over here, winds up getting really well aligned and straight. And that looks great. It's cooled down enough that I don't have to worry about being real gentle with it. I still need to be a little careful that I don't get it off center by being a little forceful, but as long as I keep both hands rotating together at the same time, I shouldn't have any problems. So what I'm doing now is I'm focusing my attention, the focus of the heat, right on this little nub of clear glass that we started with here on this left hand. I want to melt that in, get it nice and hot, and I'm letting the radiant heat kind of roll up and across that flat surface where we've encased the dichroic glass. Once I start to see some heat move into that whole area and this large glob that was on the end get melted in, I'm watching because there's a little bit of an undercut that I'm trying to avoid catching any air bubbles into. So I'm heating up all the way around and letting the glass kind of move and flow. If you don't get good heat all the way around, you'll have just the areas that are super hot flowing and moving and changing shape, but everything else that you want to adapt to this new mass that you want to put in place, if it's not warm enough, it's not going to move and you're just going to wind up with an overlap, which is where you're going to wind up catching your bubbles. Imagine you want to turn two pieces of ice into a liquid so they flow together like rivers coming together. And you don't want it to be like two pieces of ice that are still solid and frozen, and then those two frozen pieces of ice come butting up against each other, and there's a solid seam, a real obvious seam that connects the two. That can create a lot of bubbles, for one, which can be visually distracting, and then two, it can also create differences in the expansion and contraction of the glass as the two come together if they're extremely different temperatures, and that can cause some problems as well. Now, it's not such a big deal if you're going to be working as heavily as I am and you're getting a lot of heat in there to balance out the temperatures. At this point, everything is pretty much well above the molten temperature of that 1530 is kind of the softening point, and everything beyond that is where it really starts to become molten and liquid. And this is borosilicate glass, so that's that 1530 that I was talking about. Different types of boro will still have slightly higher or lower melting points, but I'm using the, what is this, Pyrex or is this Scout? I don't remember which clear glass I'm working with right now. I like both of those companies. I find they make good products, and I am not sponsored by anybody at this point, so just saying what I actually think. Okay, I can see that there is a really nice spiral that's starting inside here. Let's see if we can get that to work. There we go, yeah. See that real nice spiral that's starting inside there. And this, the right side, looks really smooth. It's got that nice kind of tapered egg shape almost. The left side, not so much. So we'll try to melt that left side in a little bit more. Get some really good heat in there, and there's enough of a spiral that I believe we can start making a lens. Oh no, we're going to do lens last, I'm sorry. Forgot what I was working on. Okay, so we're just melting this in, watching that heat really migrate in, watching the orange color on the outside, get rid of those kind of darker shadows on the inside, and then the outside changes from that orange to bright white. And I can feel everything's really moving around quite heavily. So just trying to build up a little bit of the mass. That looks pretty good. And I'll get rid of this original handle that I started with. Fire cut through that. There we go. And we'll use a little marver here that has the holes in it, so that way you can shape things a little bit. Now, the paddle that I'm using is made out of graphite or carbon, and it does not really stick to the molten glass as long as you don't get the carbon too hot, the graphite. If you get it way too hot, it will stick, but it's less likely to stick than your metal tools. Those really, really like to bond with your glass when you're working. So make sure when you're using metal tools like tweezers and such, you're just touching, moving away, touching, moving away, and occasionally dipping things in your water so that way you're keeping your tools cool. All right, the shape is looking pretty good. I think I will go in and got some dust and dirt in that one cup. I want to take a chance at adding any sort of impurities to the glass itself. Okay. Just using this mold here, trying to get the basic shape started. Once I get a little more shaping done, then I'll go in and show you all again what's going on inside the marble. I understand at this point it's kind of hard to see inside all of that glow, but good things are happening, I promise. All right, that looks like there's plenty of heat inside this. I'm just going to rotate around again to make sure it's hot all the way around. And that looks great. So now we'll just go in, gently rotating and pressing ever slightly, so slightly. I am trying to keep this piece centered as I rotate. I don't want the mass on the end to get off center from the axis that I've been rotating it on, because that will cause all sorts of problems where everything starts falling and flipping and flopping. But in the meantime, this is what we've got going on here. Let's see if I can use the dark to show up a little better. Burn yourself. It's hard to see a lot of that red at this point. You can see a little bit. Okay. Now that we've got that started, the next step that I'm going to do is add in a little peace symbol. See that yet again here, maybe? Just that little peace symbol is going to go in, and I'm going to hide it here where the dichro is a little thick. Just getting that spot where I want to apply it nice and hot. I was holding the little image above the flame, so the bottom side that I was touching, that was going to make the connection, that was getting warm. And I'm intentionally kind of rotating all the way around, making sure that the glass all around that Morini and the image itself are now becoming liquid and flowing together, and there's no one place that gravity is going to pull that image too far to get it distorted. And what's happening is by doing that, intentionally trying to go around and make sure that all around that image has been melted in. You can now see it melted in real smoothly. And when you look through the marble at the image, it'll come out just visually clear. If you smash the image too much, you can force it inside, distorting the image, and it can also create it where it actually sticks out into the void that you're trying to create. I'm trying to make this as uniform on the inside, so that way as you view it, it won't have any obvious portions that are drawing your eye to it unnecessarily. Like, yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that. Alright, now that I've got that started, I'll go in using, this is cobalt blue. It's just a nice dark color that will reflect or be a contrast against the red. And then intentionally just kind of eating the back side or the bottom side of this cobalt blue and trying to very carefully, methodically line those edges up, trying to not get things too out of whack. There we go. Now that I'm making this connection, I want to make sure that those flow together. Take it out for a second once I get those lines nice and crisp, and let that cool. Once I see some of that color leave, now I can go back in and apply heat to the backside and begin continuing the process of covering that bottom. You know, the area that the two pieces of glass are coming together is what's inside the flame. So that way the bottom glass, the marble itself, is hot enough to become tacky to accept the cobalt blue. But I'm not getting it so hot that it's changing shape. Whereas the cobalt blue rod is going through the flame, descending through, and as it's getting into the flame, it's being rotated ever so slightly, so that molten hot glass that's in the closest to the torch, or the handles here, that's molten hot and rotating towards the back, where it's going to make that connection, and the cold glass in the back is rotating towards the front, so that way it's becoming malleable. And I'm almost done here, just a little tiny bit left. Maybe you can see a little bit of that. I've got that hole there. That's a little large yet, but I do want to intentionally leave just a little pocket of clear glass on the bottom, because I like the idea that there's a light at the middle tunnel. And so if you make it a real tiny little hole, then it'll seem like it's a more distant and far away. Whereas if it's a large hole, it'll seem like it's a little bit closer because you're able to visually find it more easily. But that nice tiny little hole creates this little bit of light that'll be in the background when you're staring into the cobalt blue abyss behind the shiny dichroic glass that we've been working with. Now I can see there's also a little bit of a metallic haze that has occurred on the surface of this cobalt blue as I've applied it. So what I'm watching for right now is I've got kind of a more oxidized flame. That means there's more oxygen in the flame than propane. Those little orange candles on the tip of the flame that you'll see if you're a glass worker, those are going to be really short little candles. The orange tips are going to be very tiny, and you're just going to mostly see these blue flames that are coming out. And the blue is really what's happening when you've got a lot, or even an excess of oxygen that's burning in the flame there, and it's combusting with the oops, sorry, for just a second. I need to get this in the marker and get it sideways here. So going straight up and down is going to give you your basic shape, but then turning it sideways is going to make sure that everything from the top to the bottom is going to be that one size, or in that marble size there. So it compresses everything. If you're using a small cup, if you're using a larger cup, you're going to wind up compressing everything out and expanding until it reaches that cup size. If you've got a shape that is really close to what you're looking for, but it's just a little bit big, use one of the smaller ones. Just don't smash it inside, but rest it gently across that small ring, and that ring will actually squeeze that marble just enough as you're rotating it to continually contract in size and give it that nice, smooth, round, spherical shape that you're looking for. Okay, now that looks like a good, smooth, round base on the bottom there. Love that orange glow, huh? Okay, so we're seeing it's already losing the orange. It's now becoming more of a yellow. And as it goes, that one spot right there is getting a the shades of blue were starting to come back. Oh yeah, you can really see the shades of blue coming back now. Okay, so now that we've got this whole thing kind of started, we can get a little bit of cobalt in there, or the red dichro. But I think the surface is just a little too ripply for you to be able to see inside very well. But that's definitely some cobalt blue now, huh? Okay, so the next step is to work on the lens. That's going to be the front part that everyone is able to see through. To do that, I need to put a handle on the bottom where the cobalt blue is at. So I'll heat up both pieces of glass that I want to touch together to create the handle. But I intentionally want to leave a little stress in here so that way I can tap the handle off later. So what I'm going to do is take this out and go 1, 2, 3, let some of the heat leave, and then this new one, 1, 2, 3, and because there's an uneven distribution of heat, they're expanded and contracting slightly different rates. Okay. So now there will be stress in there as it cools. So if I tap that on something, it should fall right off. So you need to be careful that I don't tap the end of the punching rod onto anything, because then a hot molten marble could be rolling around, and it's never fun when that happens. It does happen from time to time, though. Accidents do. Alright, so I'm seeing some really decent heat moving into there. I want to get a little more heat into the actual large physical marble versus the handle that I'm kind of adding glass into the marble with. And just gently, evenly rotating and gently pushing in. Watching that shape kind of build up. It's important to get the heat into the area where those two pieces are kind of transitioning from solid to molten, and getting a lot of heat in there, because you're not going to get this new molten glass to go where you want it unless you've got the area that you want it to go to hot as well. It just cannot flow into that area if you've got it too hot or too cold. You should be able to kind of see that shape taking place on the right-hand side of the torch. Alright, we're almost there. These are looking really good. Got a solid shape happening here. Looks like it needs a little more heat to just kind of accommodate all this new mass that we're applying. That's alright. Just bounce back and forth a little bit. Heat up the new glass that we're applying, and then go into the marble to make sure it's hot enough to accept it. And back to the clear rod, gently pushing as we rotate. That looks like that's probably about enough glass. So I'll heat up the whole thing a little bit and focus my real flame here on this one spot that I remove, turning my handle at an angle so that way it's kind of removing excess as it rolls away, and rolling the two a little bit at different speeds. Go. Now, got this weird shaped marble here. It's not really marble yet. It almost looks like an ice cream cone or a sundae with that little dimple on top, or nipple on top. Now what I'm looking to do is just get a lot of heat into here. Watching the colors go from that. This has got a lot of dark shadows in it right now. So I'm really looking to get a lot of the orange inside and a lot of that white hot glow. Right. I'm intentionally not hitting this backside. You'll see that it's still very dark, that cobalt blue Hasn't really changed color. And that's because I want to keep the flames off of that putty that's in the back. If that gets too hot, then those two pieces of glass will then melt together, and that's a bad thing. It'll be harder to get the marble off later. Alright, so just kind of gently pushing down, rotating. Once I feel that that's more or less into the right size and shape, and then turning to the angle and rotating that to help smash it down a little more, give it its shape. It looks like there was not enough heat into the center of the marble, and so I'm intentionally kind of focusing my heat on this end here, so that way all the heat's going to migrate in. I'm going to be very patient. It takes a little while for all the heat to migrate in. And one of the things about glass is you cannot rush it. If you try to, it's just going to cause problems. You can wind up breaking something if it's too cold, really shaving things and pulling things off by accident if it's way too hot. So you just have to be focused and patient. Just like a Zen master. You've got this. Alright. Really good heat in there. Bring it over gently. Place it into the marble. Begin our spiraling. Intentionally going from all the way up to then bringing it down to the side. And what that's doing is it's just forcing that hot molten glass that's in the bottom to really take its shape in that marble. And then as I bring it to the side, it's then forcing the whole thing to kind of balance each other out, or itself out. And this is sounding really, really good. Alright. I'm going to go in now and just kind of get rid of any sort of surface indentations or little cracks or creases that may have occurred from going into the marble. When it's really super hot, anything that you touch could easily cause a dent. And that looks like it's pretty good to me, but I can't always tell if I'm just looking at the glass itself. So instead, what I need to do is to use the reflection on the surface here. I'll bring it down next to the torch, and I can see that there's this blue line reflection from the actual torch itself. And so I'm going to rotate it, looking for any weird bumps or jumps that are occurring in that blue reflection. And I'm rotating all the way around. I don't see anything on this top surface. That looks really sweet. Color's looking good. Got a red dichro inside. So now, we'll switch putties again. Now we've got that beautiful front surface. We'll put some feet on this, and it'll become a paperweight. We'll decorate the bottom side, and we're almost done. Oh, there's a lot of bubbles here. I don't want that, so I'm going to intentionally just heat this up, pull off a little bit, drop that into the water, and now to make sure that I don't get those same bubbles again, I'm going to bring the glass in from kind of farther out from the torch, where it's a little bit cooler, and then bring it up to where it's really, really hot. And that means it will not boil the small, thin glass. Instead, it'll just get it hot and molten. Okay, so now I'm intentionally going to get the two pieces of glass hot. I'm looking for the surface of the marble to just take on a light glow. I'm not looking for color to get all the way into the center of the marble. Just enough to attach the two, make sure it's more to the center, while it's still malleable. Going in and intentionally kind of using that momentum and swinging with the marble. Looks still very malleable. So rotating, keeping it centered. And as it comes together, I can then start to turn it sideways, melting any sort of rough edges that have occurred from the removal of that putty. And we'll put in some legs and dots and things to decorate the outside. Now, the symbol is right there. And I always like to put a little dot on the backside of the piece symbol, so that way when you're looking through the glass or through that cobalt, these little dots will help obscure that image that's on the inside. because I don't like people to find it too easily. I'm intentionally trying to make it a puzzle. And I've got 4 different levels of difficulty. A level 1 where you can see the image really clearly if you're just willing to change your perspective a bit, to a level 2 that has a smaller window of opportunity to see it, you can still see the image clearly. And then with 3s and 4s, the higher level difficulties, I start putting that dichroic glass directly in front of the image that you're looking for to really obscure it and make it as tough as possible to find. Okay, another set of 3 dots here, and then we'll put some heat on, shape it up, and it will be done. So this is coming together pretty quickly now. What you'll see that's happening is that I'm keeping the marble itself just below the flame. So you can see that heat is really getting into the base. And then I'm bringing the quarter rod into the flame, getting it nice and molten hot, and then bringing the 2 together in the flame. And then getting a little pull outside the flame, and then fire cutting through. Now because this is going to be a leg, I'm going to make sure that I get a little more mass there. So rotate around. Fire cut that off. And once I've got about the same size, I'll fire cut the other one off. Looks great. Rotation here. And the last one. Once I get this 4th leg on, I'll really let you all see what's going on. A little more mass on that leg. It won't be smaller than all the rest. Alright, there we go. So now that we've got all 4 legs on, we're going to just melt them all so they're about the same size. And if I see anything that's like off to one side or another, I can use gravity to help get everything where I want. So that's kind of the base of the paperweight. Kind of looks to me like the escape pod that the droids use for the very first Star Wars movie. Alright, so that's what it looks like on the side. Alright, so now I'll just go in real quick, heat up those bottom feet now that they're on there. Go in and set it down, make sure that it sets pretty on the table. Flatten those feet out a little bit. It looks like one of the feet is a little high, so it's got a little wobble. So just heat everything up again. Put down, make sure that wobble disappears. That looks wonderful. So now all the feet have been smashed down. You can see the same glass here is the feet look a little more red, but the pieces on the body have a little bit more of a blue hue to them. And that's the metals there, the silver specifically, that's in this particular type of glass. It's coming to the surface as you're heating it. Trying to get this right in the middle of there, so pop it off later. Okay, that looks good. It looks like the end of this this first punchy that I have here on the left-hand side was a little too hot when I put the 2 together yet, and they flowed together like water instead of 2 pieces of ice that just kind of bumped against each other. Alright, so remove the handle, I had to fire cut it, and I'm going to check to make sure there's no bubbles in that little piece, which there are. Get rid of those. Now once again, I'm using the back part of the flame. I'll work it closer and closer towards the handles and towards the base of the torch here as it heats up. But I'm really trying to avoid it boiling in small areas of glass because I don't want those bubbles. They'll become visually distracting.
That's looking really good already. So now I'm going to turn a little bit more at a 90-degree angle so the heat can rotate up and around that surface as I rotate it horizontally here. I'll see that the heat is also kind of rotating around the outside surface and up. Once again, like I said, I can use those smaller cups. Here I've got the outside little dots, which are a fun texture, but it makes it difficult to spin it. But we got the shape back that we were looking for. But you might be able to see that there are a few little kind of creases right on this very top surface. You can kind of see as I rotate it, the reflections are not smooth. So I'll go in here and just heat up that end to make sure it becomes this nice flowing glass. And just like a pond, once everything becomes calm, it'll be nice and smooth and you can see right down inside. Lovely. And let's see if we can even find that this side of it. I don't know if you can see it through the camera here. First I have to find it. Right there. Oh, it's really hidden in there. I don't know. We might have to get some better lighting to show you guys. Alright, so the last thing I want to do is just kind of go in real quick. I'll get rid of some of this excess propane. And it's really, really a oxidizing flame now because it's just so much oxygen and just a very little bit of propane. And that's just getting rid of all of that metallic haze that was on the surface that I mentioned earlier, where the glass kind of looked a little bit blue. Now you'll be able to see more of these kind of dark, rich purples that will be coming through in the glass. And they'll still leave some of that, those reflections, not reflections, the metallic coating on the outside, because I do like the different textures that it gives you, and it kind of has this outside sheen, and then you'll have all these deeper colors that kind of go back. Right, so this is where we're at right now. Everything cools very quickly because it's borosilicate. You can see that there's a lot more of these ambers and oranges and purples and things. Okay, the last step, got to take it off this handle. So we'll use this tool. These are called hot fingers. Just warm them up here in the torch a little bit. Not too hot, I don't want to get it so it sticks or anything. I just don't want to shock the glass by having it touch something really, really cold and suck out that heat out of the paperweight itself. We had that uneven heat, tapped it on the torch body, and it just, that handle snapped right off. I can see though that there are a couple of little additional pieces of glass that didn't come off all the way. So I'll just melt those in. I'm going to intentionally set it down here and make sure that it sets level. And it does. And it's important, very important, that you turn your kiln on before you get started. Unlike though what I just did this time. I got everything to the point where I just had to hit one button to get it to go. And then, of course, I was so wrapped up in this new video that I forgot to actually hit start. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is reduce the amount of oxygen, get it a really soft, cooler flame, and just kind of keep this in the back part of the flame for a minute while my kiln warms for a second. Hopefully this won't do anything too bad. I have in the past had things split on me because I rushed and didn't do things properly. Just like this time. Get out of your element, do things different, the routine is off, everything can go alright. But the nice thing is that we can just use this soft flame and flame anneal for a little while here. And that's just kind of cooling the glass off. If we can keep it above 1,000 degrees and get the kiln up to the point where it's at 1,000 degrees, we'll be golden. Because 1,000 degrees is really where everything starts to do its expansion and contraction. It's not exactly 1,000, because this is boro and it's a little bit higher than that, but it's in that area. Some of your other glass, the System 96 or Bullseye, and some of those fusing glasses that everybody uses, those are much lower temperature. Whereas I said earlier, it's that 1530 is the softening point for boro. The softening point, if I remember right, it's been a while, but for System 96, it's got a coefficient of 96. I think that one is the one that has a softening point right around 1200 degrees, so about 300 less, which is very significant. And that's even with those temperatures on the surface of Venus. All right. So this has cooled off a little bit. It's still not the ideal situation here, but I think I am going to try to get this into the kiln right away. Kiln's already coming up in temperature. This has been coming down. I think we'll be all right. All right, everybody. I'll catch you on the flip side. Peace, love, and D&D.